Hi everybody, Chris Pies here for another PCA Sim Racing Classroom. This week we are going to be tackling MotorLand Aragon. I believe that's how you pronounce it, Aragon in Spain. This coming series of racing, or this coming racetrack for Series 14 in the PCA Sim Racing series, is right in the middle of the calendar for the series. So there's been a lot of good racing up into this point, and there's still some to go. I believe we have 3 races left, including this one, but I may be mistaken. Of course, as always, for any of our information on PCA Sim Racing, just go to PCASimRacing.com and you can go to the Series 14 page to see all the information about weather, tracks, standings, results, incidents, etc. about the series. So we're going to be at a new racetrack for PCA in general, and in this Spanish track, and it's a relatively new track for iRacing as well. So we don't have a whole lot of experience, and myself included, don't have a whole lot of experience on this track. I have raced here in a couple of endurances and other series before, so I have put in laps, but never in the 992 Cup car, which is the series car, and never in the conditions that we were expected to have. So ironically, we are supposed to have a wet race, or a wet to drying track is the official weather forecast for this. When you look at where this track is in real life, it is an incredibly arid climate. I think they average around something like 11 inches of rain for the entire year. It doesn't rain a whole lot here, but nevertheless, we're in the sim and it will be raining for this track. So we're going to have a couple of firsts for this particular Series 14. Not only the track and the venue is different, but also the weather. This is the first and only wet race for Season 14. So we're going to have 2 things to tackle here. As you can tell, this is a recording and it's not live as it normally is. That is because I am traveling for work and I am out of the country currently. So I will post this a little bit earlier. If you're watching it now, obviously, it'll be around the same time, or maybe a little earlier this weekend when I post it. But sorry I can't be with you guys. I won't be attending this race actually either, due to my travel schedule. So I'm going to do this one a little bit different. We're going to kind of just run some laps together and chat about it as we drive. Instead of doing kind of the behind the car view, we're going to learn together. Because it is a wet track, and because the weather can be variable in terms of how wet it is on track, I want to talk you with what I'm driving, how I'm driving, and what I'm kind of trying to feel out when I'm driving in the wet. Where to find the grip, where there's not grip, experiment, try to see how the track is changing, and the track will change from lap to lap. So let's kind of hop in here, and we can start taking our laps. So here we go. We're going to be at MotorLand Aragon, and we're going to be in the 992 Cup car. First thing first, make sure you've got your windshield wipers on, so you can actually see. The pit exit on this track is a little bit squirrely. It's lined with painted surfaces. This is all racetrack, so we want to be able to get on gas quickly, but at the same time avoid the paint. Now, in general, in wet weather racing, what we're trying to do is we're trying to avoid the shiny stuff. So as you can see, when I'm driving around here, I am looking for shiny areas of the racetrack and trying to avoid them. Shiny means very wet or even standing water, which can lead to hydroplaning and loss of control, at the very least loss of grip. Darker colors of the track are not standing water, or less saturated with water, and theoretically have more grip. In general, when you're doing wet weather racing, what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to drive off the racing line. The racing line is where all the rubber has been laid down. It is a polished surface. There's less nooks and crannies for the water to kind of escape into, and it leads to standing water. As you can see on the apex of this particular corner, look how the big puddle is on the inside. We don't want to touch that. Similarly, another practice on wet weather racing is we want to avoid painted surfaces. So curbings, colored tarmac, so like these green areas of this track, all painted surfaces in the wet tend to be pretty slick. And this track, from the few laps that I've done, is no exception. So we're going to be searching out for grip. We're going to be looking to see where the car can go around the track most effectively knowing full well that it's most likely not going to be the traditional line. It's mostly going to be offline. So this is what I would classify maybe a lightly wet or moderately wet track. We do have the standing water, and so we have to be careful for those puddles. Another general rule of thumb in racing in the rain is under braking or heavy grip areas or requests, so heavy braking, lateral load, etc., or even acceleration in some instances, we want to make sure we're definitely not on line. So like going into turn 1 on this track, we want to make sure that when we brake, we're not braking on the heavy polished surface. It's very easy to lose control of a car under heavy braking in the rain, especially if you're braking in a puddle. The car will snap on you and make sometimes engage in enough yaw where it's just absolutely unrecoverable. So as we're going through here, just kind of feeling for where the grip is, we want to make sure that we are kind of getting a general idea of what it feels like online and feels like offline. Sometimes in the rain, depending on how wet it is, being online is perfectly reasonable and is actually the quickest way around a corner. So sometimes you want to experiment to see, is there enough grip to send it through a puddle online, knowing full well that you are going to have little control, but it is still the fastest way around the corner. At the end of the day, the whole goal is just to get around the track as quickly as possible, and getting around it as quickly as possible may include sending it through some sketchy areas that have water, because that's the fastest way. All right, enough about racing in the rain. Let's see if we can try to figure out what the line is here. Notice how I'm braking offline, middle of the track, coming into this wide left-hander, the final 2 corners of the track. We want to keep it out wide because that's where the grip is. All the dark stuff is on the outside. The goal is to apex late, right around that apex point, and we come up to the start finish into turn 1. I've been braking around the 150 board, so we'll see the 150. We'll be offline, as I said, and we'll do a nice light brake pedal. We kind of have to go through this big puddle on the inside, so we just want to make sure the car's in a good position. We're off throttle when we go through it, and we're just trying to steer the car through. Coming up to this right-hander, normally we'd be right on the curb, but we want to displace it because there's a little bit of water on the inside. We can track out normally. This next left-hander, we're going to lift a little early, a little light brake, and the goal is to keep this car really wide around this puddle because that's where the grip is. Going through that puddle tends to lead just to a ton of understeer. The double right-hander is pretty regular, a little bit of an early brake, and again, wide entry, avoid that apex puddle, and then track out normally. Coming to the diabolical right-left here, we're going to brake just before the crest of the hill, off the brakes, roll it down. We can hit the apex here, a little bit of brake to get the car turned in, rotated to the left side, slowly roll on the throttle, and then we have to be really, really late with this last turn in and this last sweeper. Keep the right side tires on the dry stuff. Avoid the curb on the exit. If you get on it like I did there, the car is going to want to pull out to the right. This long straightaway isn't straight in the beginning. Don't lose focus. Make sure you're still turning the car. There's a couple of puddles on this straightaway, one there and one there, that we need to make sure that our steering wheel is straight through. It shouldn't be a problem, but it is something to take note. We can see the puddle coming into this hard braking zone. We're going to brake at the 150 board, and then as we transition into the corner, get off the brakes, let the car coast, get a little bit off the curbing for the late last apex, which is right there on the throttle. The earlier we can get on the throttle to that last apex, that's the goal. Turn 1 again, 150 board, we're going to do a light brake, and then the goal is to get the car rotated, turned in through the puddle on the exit. The right-hander here can be pretty much flat. Just be mindful of the painted surface right there on the blend line and right here. We turn in a little bit earlier. We're going to see if we can have a little bit more grip. There is more grip on the apex there, so we can take that corner a little bit tighter. This one we're going to send in a little bit more aggressively. Still take a wide entry because of the dark stuff and get on throttle soon. Right-hander seems to be no problem here. Full flat throttle. Early brake. Nice wide turn. Apex just on the outside of that puddle. Almost pretend like the curb is the puddle, not where the curb actually is. Nice wide entry. Off the brakes. We're going to roll our speed through. Looks like a traditional line through there. Seems to be okay. There's no standing water. Really late here. Delay our throttle, and then throttle. When we go to throttle, we want to be committing to it. We don't want to be like stabbing at it. You can see all the puddling on the inside. We want to try to avoid it if we can. It just leads to unpredictable nature in the car. Now the race itself may be wetter than this. It may not be as wet as this. If it's drier than this, then a more traditional line is going to be favored. If it's wetter, you may have to displace apexes and break off line even more than we're doing now to avoid the puddling. So super late apex. We're waiting for this last one right there. Throttle all the way through. Up a little wide. You can see how the car really is dancing on the paint. We don't want to touch that like that. Brake at the 150. Get off the brake. Go through the puddle. Nice wide. I'm going to have to lift a little bit. The car's starting to understeer. I'm going to try turning it a little earlier. Get on the apex point here. Seems to be okay. This is where having your relative up in the top of the screen, right in the middle, is really helpful to see if the lines that you're picking are improving on the speed or going slower. I'm going to try to drive it in a little bit deeper, brake a little bit harder. See if that gives me any help. Brake early, roll the speed down the hill. Traditional apex. Brake, traditional apex. Feet on the throttle. This corner, oh, see, touch the paint. As soon as I touched the paint, the car spun. So do everything you can not to touch paint in these wet conditions. It seems like the painted surfaces on this track are just absolutely no grip. And it's easy to just absolutely lose it if you just have one tire or one fraction of a tire touching the paint. It's just going to loop like that. In terms of passing, where's some good places to pass here? I feel like this corner coming up right here if you get brave and you really dive on the inside on someone, you can try to get alongside them. You had a nice big long... Wow, the car did not slow down. Okay. But it's so difficult to judge. If you try to brake later and you try to brake just a little bit harder than you were before, one lock up and you're pretty much going to go south through the corner like I did there. Turn 1's a good passing place. This left-hand corner, if you can get position on somebody, can work pretty well. Delaying throttle just a little bit through there seems to be much better. A little early and just kind of coast to the apex. That looked really good. Turn in, a little bit of brake, and then more brake on the way in. Let's take it nice and tight and see if that has grip in there. Yeah, that actually didn't seem too bad. So maybe taking a more traditional line through that corner offsets the distance traveled if you take it too wide. Same thing through here. Yeah, it looks like I picked up a little bit of time going through there. So maybe a traditional line through there is okay with this amount of moisture. Coming down the hill. Just never seems to end, and this corner never seems to end. Let's see if we can get it a little tighter and see if the car will actually turn. Yeah, see, I'm just understeering. As soon as I touch that paint, or not the paint, the puddling, the car just doesn't want to turn. So I still think the big wide sweeper leading onto this back straight is best if you ride around the outside edge. Alright, coming up to this corner again, we're going to brake just before the 150. There we go. Feed it in because there's no puddle right here. Let the car run wide. And then do that final apex right here. There it is. Brake at the 150 board. Go through the apex point. Off the brakes. Accelerate. A little bit of off the accelerator. Late apex up the hill. Back on it. A little bit of breathe and a touch of brake. The car coast. off the brake, or off the gas, a little bit of brake, and then hard brake. Try to get down to close to the apex. Yeah, that seems to work really well in these conditions. Brake a little bit later. Let's see if we can get down to the apex or get closer. Get a good angle coming in. Yeah, that was it. Right just before the crest. We can touch that curb because that's an unloaded tire. Accelerate coming out. A little bit of a breathe. Patience, then on it. I lost a little bit of time, went too much in the puddle. And then down the big, big long straight. Alright, let's try to put together a lap now, knowing that we know what we know. Avoid the big puddle like that. Alright. Qualifying time. Let's see what we can do. Yeah, definitely better out around mid-track through there. Alright, cruise down into the final two corners. Let's really nail it. I think that 150 board is a good brake zone. We just can't hit the brakes too hard. And we have to trust the car is going to slow down and take a good line through here. Wide. There it is. Much better. Yeah. There it is. So that's the big thing about racing in the rain. It's just ultimately, at the end of the day, it's finding where the grip is. We will search, try to find it. And it's whatever works. You know, in general, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the car, when it's turning, we want it to turn and do nothing else. We don't want it to accelerate. We don't want it to brake. When we need to brake, we want the car to brake. We don't want it to be turning as well. So it's kind of an exaggeration of no trail braking. I mean, you can still trail brake to get early rotation in a corner, but the car really does not want to do two things at once in the rain. It has a very, very smaller grip envelope than it would in the dry, and so we need to maximize that grip, or we need to be very, very selective on what we ask the car to do, because it already doesn't do two things well in the dry. It does it even worse in the rain. So coming through like this section, I'm off all pedals because I need the car to turn. I'm not braking, I'm not accelerating. Coming through here, I'm off the pedals, and it's just kind of coasting, waiting for the car to kind of get a good spot before I can get on the throttle and get a good run coming through. Keeping that in mind and keeping the balance of the car is just really important. And then try to minimize your mistakes at the end of the day. It's difficult. There's not a lot of grip out here, and it creeps up on you really quick. I'll just show, like coming up into here, if I brake at the exact same point on line that I would normally brake, watch what happens. 150, brake. Oh, I've locked up everything. Just it's not slowing down. And that's because I'm trying to break through a puddle. So you have to find those puddles, avoid them, and pick what line works best for you. And what works best for you may not work best for the next person. So that's kind of the big catch here. Make sure you practice your pit entries. Entries for pit lane in the rain tend to be really weird because there's uncommon spots or flat spots that can lead to puddling on pit entry. So just make sure you practice it. Don't make your first pit entry be the one in the rain or the one in the race. So let's take a look at that lap. Just make sure everything looks good from a top-down view. Back it up. Oh, wow. Spray. You can see we're going through the puddling here, but controlling on exit. A little bit of a lift here on the way up the hill, and then back on throttle. Got on the paint a little bit, had to wait. Had to be really patient through here. A lot of puddling on apex, but it seems to be the quickest way. Dive it in, break in a straight line on the way on the outside, and then almost a traditional line through here, just waiting for the car to grip. This double right-hander has lots of grip. Brake towards the end of the curbing, and then delay our turn in to try to get the car in a straight line. Once we get it in a straight line, then we go. Brake before the ridge here. Turn in early. It always feels early. The car will understeer. And then kind of just coast down the hill here. Get the car pointed and roll on the accelerator. Be very, very patient. I wanted to point out, look how much water there is on the inside here. So what we're trying to find is where the grip is. And if you look at this entry point through here, you can see you got a bunch of puddling on the inside on the curbing. You've got some wet spot or less grip right here in the middle. You've got this darker area right here, which is actually probably got a lot of grip. The problem is that this short area ends up in a puddle. We don't want to be there. And then look on the very outside. Right out here on the right side where your loaded tires are for the left-hander. This is all gray. Looks like a really good spot in terms of grip. So if we go forward a little bit, we can see now that we're turning in, again, this is all lighter, or this is all like kind of a mirror finish. So this means has low grip. This means there's low grip down here. You can actually see the puddles. But out here on the edge, you can almost see how dry it is. I mean, it just kind of forms itself. So that's the new track that we want to drive. We want to drive around with our right side tires on the grippy surface. The left side tires, they can touch the wet surface if they're unloaded. So that's not a problem. So as we come in here, you can see my car, I'm trying to keep the right side tires in the grippy surface and treating that as the corner as opposed to the traditional corner with the curbing. Go all the way down the straightaway. We know what that looks like. And then, as always, when we were kind of looking at this, let me bank the camera down. So you can see as we come up to the brake zone for this, probably one of the more technical corners. Okay, there. Look at all this puddling on the normal line, the racing line. We don't want to be anywhere near there. We even got a puddle right here that's just before our brake zone, which is the 150 board. So we want to make sure that we're not hitting the brakes in the puddle. We want to be after the puddle braking. Now this puddle, depending on how wet it is, may not even exist. If it doesn't exist, then you have to use your boards. But if you're driving and you notice that there's a puddle here and you're noticing that you're going to have to brake after it, brake after it. One of the things that's counterintuitive with this particular corner is that if you brake too early and you brake in the puddle, you're going to lock all your wheels up. And once you lock your wheels up, if you keep them locked, you're just going to keep sailing through the corner. So even by braking early here, you brake on an area with low grip, you're going to have no grip all the way through the braking area. So we need to make sure that we're hitting our brake point properly at the 150 board. Right there. And then once we hit the brakes, we're keeping our car in a good line along the puddle here on the right, and then tucking it in for this long left-hander on the way through. We tuck it in a little bit early, but it's just such a long corner. The idea is that we're basically scrubbing some speed by turning in early. We're going to let the car run all the way wide because we can see the puddling. We're going to go through a puddle here, and it's going to understeer the car, but then it'll grip back up on the exit. And that's fine because it's going to put us in a good spot way out here on the right. And ultimately, this is the apex that matters. This is the only one that matters. We want to apex this super late so we can get on throttle early. Like right here. And ride the momentum through the corner. Avoiding all these curbing and these puddles out here on the right. So there you go. That's MotorLand Aragon. You know, good track, fun track. It's got a lot of interesting corners. Lap times go by pretty quick because there isn't a whole lot of corners on this track. The biggest highlight is that super long straight and that sweeper that leads onto that long straight. That's super important to try to find where the grip is. Try to time it so you can get on throttle as early as you can, but not in such a way that you're going to have to jeopardize, the traction in the car. We ultimately want to put the car in an area where we're maximizing the grip through the corners, but sometimes traveling a corner too long to find that grip doesn't outweigh just taking the shortest distance, which may be going through a puddle in a low grip area. So long as you know that it's low grip, it can be done very effectively still. But that's part of the fun of racing in the rain. You get to experiment with things. Others tend to make mistakes. We want them to make mistakes. We don't want to make mistakes. Positions can be gained. And so keep a clean race, have a good pit strategy. If the track does end up drying throughout the stint, there's going to be more and more grip and you'll go faster and faster. Another question that I tend to get on racing in the rain or in a transitioning track is, when do you switch to dry tires as opposed to wet tires? I would say the best time to switch to dry tires is when your wet tires feel... Basically what will end up happening is if you're on a wet track, your wet tires, you have to be on the wet tires or else you won't even be able to drive. That will have a baseline feel of grip. That grip will get better and better as the track starts to dry. And it will get to the point where those wet tires on that drying track will go from your lap times improving to all of a sudden your lap times start staying at the same spot and start getting worse, or the car starts feeling like it's driving worse, almost like the track is getting wet again. There's less grip. At that point, your wet tires are overheating, and you can check your pressures as well. It tends to be, if your tire pressures are in the 28s, if you're using imperial units, if your PSIs are in the 28s with wet tires, you're starting to heat them up way too much. And at that point, wet tires will fall off because of the heat that gets put into them, and they get too hot and they get greasy, and that's where you get that feeling of it's a wet track again. Well, the track has been drying. Why is it getting worse? At that point, that's pretty much the crisscross point where you can jump on slicks, or you should be able to jump on slicks, and either be at the same point as those wet tires, those hot wet tires, or you'd be even better. And then the track should keep on drying, and as it dries, the slicks will go faster, obviously. When you jump on slicks onto a drying track, you still have to be careful of driving offline. All the cars are going to be driving pretty much the same line, or about thereabouts the same. That line is going to get drier quicker, which means if you pop out to try to pass someone in a situation, or where you try to pass someone because you're on slicks, they're on wets, and you pop off that dried line, you may find yourself on a wet surface with slick tires and have no grip. So it's just some things you need to keep in mind in order to better race and better be prepared for a transitioning track. So anyway, like I said, wish I could be with you guys this coming weeks. You're going to have lots of fun. Have fun with it. Make sure you practice in the wet. I would almost practice in overly wet conditions just to get your eye in to see where the really, really bad parts of the track are. But keep your nose clean. You'll make up a lot of positions and you'll have a good, successful race. I appreciate it. I may not be around either for the next classroom. I may get Lee for somebody else to handle that one. But in the meantime, enjoy MotorLand Aragon, enjoy the weather, and I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.